I want to get spooky for a minute, Jim. I want to talk about the ghost story aspect of this episode. So in the very beginning, we talked about the different. We kind of get this potpourri of all the different action from the characters, but we see Ethelrita doing homework apparently, or no, she's actually writing a letter. It looked like, which I'm wondering who she's writing to or what. But we also see the body prep area of the morgue. It's this contrast between the upstairs life, which is all kind of wholesome and family oriented, versus the dark and dripping kind of dungeon-esque morgue. And you see it, and it's all shot like a horror film too, like all the point of view shots. And Ethelrita hears this creaking outside of her door. She goes to look, and there's this man sitting on the steps, and it turns around. He's fucking cadaverous. He's missing his nose. His eyes are roomy. He looks like a fresh zombie off The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
She shuts her door, and again, this is shot like something out of The Conjuring. She's bracing her whole body against it, terrified. And then you hear what I think is the ghost get up and go downstairs. And then that's it. There's no... Ethelrita doesn't make anything of this. There's nothing else mentioned or said. This could be a night terror. Who knows? And then Zalmera is literally laundering cash, Walter White style, in the bathtub of their little flop house. And Swanee starts stirring, and Zalmera goes to check on her, and something in the tub gets up and rises, and it's this faceless or this noseless corpse man. And it starts like something pulls the covers off of Swanee. It starts raining, I think, blood or mud, perhaps, from the ceiling. I couldn't tell exactly. It looked like it could be maybe old cadaverous blood or it's mud.
Yeah.
And this man, Zalmera shuts her eyes as this presence walks past, pauses by Swanee, and then takes away. And then takes off, and Swanee's there shivering and throwing up, and she comforts her and says, "Don't mind Mr. Snowman." Also, in the first episode, remember we remember that the mysterious presence that we pan over on the street, and someone zoomed in on that, and it's a dead ringer for Mr. Snowman. It wasn't Timothy Olyphant, as I surmised. It's this ghostly corpse character.
Yeah.
This goes on to, like we talked about with Swanee's last episode, where she talks about, things that haunt are not, they don't haunt places, they haunt people, that there's some evil followed the, Smutney family or Zalmera and the Brills family from Mississippi. Is there a ghost in this season of Fargo? What is Fargo's tolerance for the supernatural?
It certainly looks like it. I look at these two scenes and I say, okay, one of these could very well be some kind of thematic, like an allegory sort of thing, where you've got this, this specter of death sort of approaching Swanee, and she's already feeling very bad. And then, immediately after this happens, Zalmera goes over and rolls her over and has to shake her awake and thinks she's dead. All of this could be figurative, right? With this character, this figure. But then I look at the scene with Ethelrita at the beginning, and she's clearly affected by it. What she's seeing there is something that she very much really sees, and that scares the shit out of her, Conjuring style, like you mentioned. But then you're right, it goes on to not mention any of that, right? She goes on with her day-to-day, she doesn't mention it to her parents, although they have talked about it. So maybe it could be, the seed of this was planted in her mind by Swanee and her story about the haunting, and so now she's just seeing things, or it could be that, she really saw something, and she just didn't bring it to her family because they already know, they've already talked about it. I don't know. It's muddy.
I got the feeling that her mom tries to keep this from Ethelrita. Hearing her aunt and her aunt's lover talk about this is the first time. But I want to go and review the supernatural in Fargo that we've seen thus far. In season 1, we had the character of Lorne Malvo, played by Billy Bob Thornton. There was a theory that he was literally the devil himself because of he was able to get in and out of situations. There was an instance with the bathroom where a light malfunction happened. He disappeared. He got out of a basement with only one exit, undetected by the police. He was this instigator of evil. He could go up to these people who are normal and inspire them with like a touch or a word to commit insane acts of violence out of seemingly nowhere.
Yeah.
Had a quote after eating a slice of apple pie, which is another interesting connection to Nurse Mayflower. He says, "That's the best apple pie I've had since the Garden of Eden."
Mm-hmm.
Now he later on gets killed, and like those theories went by the wayside. But that's interesting. Also in that season, Lorne Malvo tries to convince a target of his operations that he's going insane, and he does this by making him think that a biblical plague of all the biblical plagues are he released locusts in his store. He fucks with the plumbing in his house to make shower of blood. All this kind of stuff happen. It culminates in a fishnado. Okay, a literal like a rain of fish and frogs and all this other kind of shit falling on the car. It causes a car wreck,
which is possible. We looked this up. We went into great detail in the first season about this, but a fishnado is possible.
This can happen. It's very unlikely, and but it can happen. In season 2, as far as the paranormal, a literal UFO shows up at the climax of the season, spoils a shootout, and has a profound effect on the plot. Comes out of nowhere, really. They kind of hint it, and there's definite hints that there's like some paranormal shit happening, but then in season 3,
let's make note that aliens not necessarily supernatural in the sense that we're talking about, right?
But you definitely, they fall under the paranormal, like, right? Like
it's
outside,
certainly,
outside of our current understanding of science and whatnot. Then in season 3, you have the Paul Moraine character, who a lot of people theorized represents this mythical character called the Wandering Jew, which, according to Wikipedia, is this supposedly mythical immortal man who wanders the world because he did some insult to Christ, or he did some other thing that made him be cursed to wander the earth. And he pops up in season 3 a couple of times to give advice to characters, but the most noticeable time he pops up is when there's this incident with Nikki Swango and Mr. Wrench where they're in a prison bus, and the Vargas criminal outfit has this Yuri enforcer, the guy that wears the wolf heads, to go and kill these guys assassinate them en route to the prison. They flip over the bus. There's this fight. Swango and Mr. Wrench flee to the woods. They're followed there by Yuri and his gang with crossbows. Mr. Wrench takes a crossbow to the throat. Swango, I think, takes 2 crossbows to her thigh and to maybe her abdomen. And then there are they fight the attackers off. Yuri's still alive. He loses his ear. Swango and Mr. Wrench stagger into the woods. They come across a clearing where there's this brightly lit bowling alley in the middle of nowhere. They go inside. They meet this character, Paul Moraine, and he hands her a kitten called Ray, who I think they hint is the soul of her lover that just died, the other one of the Ewan McGregor brothers. Mm-hmm. He gives her, he says something that, like, Mr. Wrench, that they debated about keeping Mr. Wrench here, but he was able to talk the powers that be into letting him go because he's on a better path now. He gives them a car and then tells them to go essentially fight evil. Then Yuri stumbles in, who is a Russian Cossack. This is a lot of backstory, but Yuri stumbles in, missing his ear, to this bowling alley, and then gets this vision of these dead Russian Jews that were murdered in the 18th century, and the idea of the souls of these people that his ancestors murdered delivered judgment to him. Okay? And then that's, like that. So, like, was this heaven? Was this all, like, was this all, in Swango and Yuri and Wrench's head? I don't know. But if you're new to Fargo, and maybe Coen Brothers in general, films in general, because they, like, Coen Brothers shit all has this, like unexplained UFO experiences, unstoppable supernatural evil forces, like, that's in the Coen palette. So is this an actual no shit ghost? I would say that you almost it couldn't be, except for like the UFO in season 2 that actually turned out to be a real thing.
Right, and like you mentioned, it definitely affects the plot, right? It's not something they're doing that's thematic. It's something that comes out of nowhere, is semi-supernatural, and also blows the plot to pieces. And it makes me wonder if they're going to be doing something later with the ghosts like that, or if they haven't already done that. Like I'm wondering about Orietta at this point. Like, is she perhaps one of these alien type things? I mean, we've talked about, her relation to Malvo, and that she's kind of this agent of chaos, but it could be more than that, right? This could be part of the ghost that's haunting this family. Because why is she making a pie for this family, filling it with epcac, trying to harass them and haunt them, if she doesn't have any connection to them?
Oh God, theory. Lorne Malvo, bastard child of Josto, Fada, and Nurse Mayflower.
Yeah. Oh God.
With those evil apple pie connections. So here's the thing. I'm gonna do a little bit of devil's advocate. I'm gonna do a little bit of Lorne Malvo advocacy here.
Okay.
Because I actually do think I think it's a ghost. Like you're right. The fact that two people see this, it's connection. It's like this family haunting. It ties into what Swanee said last episode. But there's another interpretation. We already have a character has a severe mental illness in this season. You got this, Wef has got at least OCD, probably a severe case of Tourette's to go along with it. He's just kind of like, a whole host of barely treated, barely under control things he's dealing with. Mm-hmm. A lot of times mental illnesses manifest themselves when you're in your late teens to early 20s. And I wonder, and that's another way that a curse or a haunting could follow a bloodline or family, because we know that a lot of times mental illness or being prone to mental illnesses and addiction problems, that is somehow in some way heritable. Mm. I wonder if this kind of hallucination, this kind of schizophrenia, they're hinting, because I get a little bit of some kind of manic energy from honestly both Swanee and Zalmera. It could be just them being irrepressible Bonnies running around fucking shit up, and it's like, but like there is something a little off kilter about Zalmera, I thought. And it would be interesting, I think, to have this be not a literal haunting, but like some kind of like genetic mental illness runs in a family. Another. This is a meditation on privilege in a lot of ways this season. What it means to be an American, what it means to be a good American, what it means to be white. Frustrations of women and versus men. Another privilege is whether you're whether you're mentally ill or not. That's a roll of the dice. I think it'd be interesting to take it to that. To be clear, I do think it's a ghost. I think it's a real ghost, but it also could be exacerbated by an existing mental illness or a developing one that Ethelrita is perhaps starting to suffer from. So I just want to throw that out there.